looking at it based on the new numbers that are coming out, and we may have to include them in the list of countries that we will, you could say, ban or whatever it is during this period of time. But yeah, the numbers have gone up fairly precipitously over the last 24 hours, so we may be adding that. And we may be adding a couple of others, and we may frankly start thinking about taking some off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a correspondent with Hong Kong Phoenix TV. You have mentioned that the number in China has been decreasing. China has made tremendous progress in the past weeks.
Sure.
I'm wondering how much confidence does this give you to control the virus in the United States? And do you see the data China has been sharing with the United States has been helpful?
I think it has been helpful. We've been working very much with China. I've spoken, as you know, with President Xi. They went through hell, and their numbers are starting to look very good. They're really looking very good. We're very happy about that. We are sharing data, yes. In fact, we're sharing quite a bit of data, including the fact that some of our pharmaceutical companies are working over there right now with large groups of people. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau yesterday.
Yes,
did you discuss the potential closing of the border between Canada and the U.S.? And by extension, are you considering ways to salvage the $2 billion daily trade between the two countries?
So we didn't discuss the border. We've had a very good relationship, just about finished with the USMCA, as you know. He called me to tell me that. I think that was the primary reason for the call. At the time, his wife had not been diagnosed, and she's a lovely lady, wonderful lady, great lady. And since then, I've read that the result was that she has it. And I was a little surprised. I think he was surprised also. We did discuss it prior to. She's going to be fine, but he thought that she would not most likely have the virus. Unfortunately, she does. But we didn't discuss the border yesterday, no. Go ahead, please. If you have any questions for these great geniuses up here, you should, even a business question, related to what we're talking about.
Mr. President, Ross Palumbo from ABC News Miami. As a relatively new Floridian, what is your message today to the cruise line industry and the travel industry that Florida depends upon? And since Senator Rick Scott and Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez have the same exposure as you and they are self-isolating, what's your message to them, that they shouldn't be?
Well, I don't know that I had exposure, but I don't have any of the symptoms. And we do have a White House doctor, and I should say many White House doctors, frankly. And I asked them that same question, and they said, you don't have any symptoms whatsoever. And we don't want people without symptoms to go and do the test. The test is not insignificant. As far as the cruise line business, we're with them all the way. It's a great business. It's a great U.S. business, frankly. And I know how important they are to the country. That includes airlines, but the cruise line business obviously was hit very hard. We had a tremendous success out in Oakland, where we moved it. Vice President Pence did a fantastic job with that. We worked with UK, we worked with Canada. They took their people back in Canada. It was approximately 600 people. UK likewise took a large number of people back to the United Kingdom. And we have people quarantined. It was a big operation, and it worked out really, you don't hear about it anymore. It worked out really well. Mike, you may even want to say something about that, because that was really done properly.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And that program with the Grand Princess, the ship, is continuing to be administered in the highest standards, orderly way, as the President directed. And Americans that needed treatment have received them. I spoke to the governor of Iowa today, and some of those who now have been cleared are able, in proper supervision, to be returning to Iowa. They're making arrangements for them to do that. Others in Texas, others in Georgia. Again, it's another example of the extraordinary cooperation. Governor Abbott, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. But to add to that, the President directed me last Saturday to travel down to Miami. We met with all the leaders of the cruise line industry. Several cruise lines have announced a 60-day pause in operations. Our Department of Homeland Security has praised them for doing that because of the unique health challenges, particularly presented to seniors with underlying conditions. We have a proposal from the cruise line industry, but they're currently considering what other steps that they might take, perhaps even similar to what those other lines have taken. We're anticipating some response on that in the next 24 hours. But as the president said, the American people cherish our cruise line industry, men and women who work on the ships, men and women who work on the shore, all the economies that are so benefited by a vibrant cruise line industry. And what the president's directed us to do is whether there is a pause in the moment, as some cruise lines are doing, and as we all continue to discuss, we want to work with the cruise line industry to ensure that when we come through this, that cruise lines and the medical services that are available and for the passengers and all of the crew, that cruise lines are safer than ever before and can prosper for many years to come.
Go ahead, please.
This question is for Doctors Fauci and Birx. Dr. Fauci, based on what you currently know, what is the trajectory for when this outbreak will peak? How long will the American people have to remain on this emergency footing? And for Dr. Birx, as the administration tries to get its arms around this test kit shortage issue, the next glaring need could be respirators and related hospital equipment. So what is the administration doing right now to ramp up production of respirators and that kind of equipment should this outbreak persist?
So when you have an outbreak like this, particularly if you're trying to interfere with it, it's really impossible to predict the time element of when it's going to peak and when it's naturally going to go down. So if you look at the situation where countries really did not get to the point of trying to contain and mitigate very well, you see a peak over several weeks and then down again over other several weeks. What we're trying to do with the efforts that we're doing is to blunt that peak. And I mentioned it many times, and I think it's important and appropriate for me to mention it again because it answers your question. When you talk about preventing infections from without in, which is the kind of travel restrictions we're talking about, then how do you handle what you already have in your country? You continue some sort of containment, but you also do mitigation, and you try to proportion it to the areas where there are the most infections. The success of that and how much you make this turn into this is going to give you the amount of time. If we're successful, it'll be less. If we're not successful, it's going to be more. But these kind of things generally run out in a few months. Hopefully, we'll make it several weeks, 8, 9, whatever weeks. But I can't give you a number because it depends on how successful we are.
Great, thank you. It's a great question, and Dr. Fauci and I have worked together a very long time and continue. It's a privilege to work with him every day. So I think you can learn and I appreciate there were some graphics done by some of the reporting over the last several days. If you align the data from China with the data with South Korea, you can start to see almost a complete overlay of that data. And so that's what we're tracking very closely, as well as Italy. But you have an excellent question. I just want to make one note. In South Korea, I want to repeat, only 4% of the tests were positive. That means 96% of the people had a different respiratory disease because we're in the middle of flu season, cold season, and all of the other respiratory diseases that we get every day. In LabCorp and Quest early data, they're running about 1 to 2% positive. That means that we have a lot more other respiratory disease out there besides the coronavirus, and that's why the screening is critical. But even with the screening, we're going to run what we think are very low rates. Needless to say, though, we're taking it extraordinarily seriously to plan for what could come. Not what Dr. Fauci talked about, blunting the curve. That makes it much less high need at that peak of the curve that we're all planning for. So we're in full inventory of all of our assets by the president unlocking and this emergency order and the Secretary of HHS's ability. It unlocks all of those stockpiles, those needs, what the VA has, what the DOD has, what the National Guard has, and what every hospital has. And the hospital emergency preparedness plan allows them to defer elective issues to keep those hospital beds open for those who might need it. So we're in full planning mode for each of those things.
And I might add that we are in the process, and in some cases have already done it, ordered a large number of respirators just in case. We hope we don't need them, but we've ordered a large number. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In your speech to the nation, you mentioned the situation in China and South Korea have improved, and you're thinking about remove the restrictions, also the warning
Right.
in place right now. When can we expect that announcement, and how do you see the overall progress that Asian countries made?
Well, some are making progress, some are not, as you know, but some are making progress. And as they make progress, as they get down to the number that we all think is right, that they know is right, we know is right, we'll be opening it up. And some are really moving along rapidly. We hope to be able to open things up as quickly as possible. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask Secretary Azar and Dr. Fauci just how Dr. Fauci, okay?
Right, better,
all right.
better. Not 100%, but 90%.
Right.
Go ahead.
This affects the elderly primarily, and in that sense, it's an unusual disease. Is any specific research being done as to why it affects our senior citizens more than others?
So I don't mean to diminish your question, but we already know why it would affect senior citizens more. Because when you talk about anything that requires a robust immune system, as you get older, your immune system is not as potent as it is when you are young. And that's the reason why when you talk about even influenza, which we have extraordinary experience with over decades and decades, the people who are very vulnerable are the elderly and those with underlying conditions. The same thing holds true for a variety of other disease. Why cancer is more prevalent in mostly in older individuals, because the immune system that screens for it is less robust. So it really is something that is kind of well known over a lot of studies.
Okay.
Over probably the basic study is common sense that as a person gets older, their organs are not as strong and they're not producing the same type of insulin in their bodies as what they was whenever they was teenagers and in their 20s and in their 30s and some possibly even in their 40s. That whenever you become in your 60s and 70s and 80s, your body basically starts shutting down. And it starts shutting down slowly as far as different organs not being able to produce 100%. It would be the same thing of you having a motor in your automobile. And whenever you first buy it, man, it runs like a top. It don't miss, it don't crackle, it don't pop. It's got all kinds of power. It'll take you to and from without a hesitation at all. But you get 100, 150 to 250,000 miles on that motor and on that automobile, it becomes more susceptible of breaking down. It becomes more susceptible in not having the proper horsepower. It becomes more susceptible in having a miss or something else not being like it was whenever it was designed and manufactured brand new. So it's a common sense question of the reason why that not only the coronavirus is more susceptible of attacking the elderly people, but any other disease out there. But I do have a question, which is this. My niece out in California worked with the animal clinic for a period of time, and they discovered out west, out in California, that females are more susceptible of catching cancer if they've never had a litter of cats or dogs. And if this characteristic is the same in cats and dogs as it is in humans, how come it has not been widely taught to the medical industry that if a woman has at least one child, it reduces her chances of catching breast cancer or any other kind of cancer significantly, because it changes the genetic makeup within the body. The same as it changes the genetic makeup in a dog or a cat. How come this has not been discovered and talked about among the professionals or the medical communities? That would be a question that I would want to ask one of those doctors that's standing up there with the president right now pertaining to those findings. We know after you get older that you're no longer going to be able to produce certain characteristics that the organ ordinarily produces or can conduct, based around being basically aged and worn out, the same way as an automobile. But how come, pertaining to cancer, that has not been discussed in and around and with the medical communities?
OAN, please. OAN.
Mr. President, the Chinese officials are expressing some tones of discontent with how where the source of this virus has come from, and they're spinning some odd narratives. What are your response to the Chinese officials who are doing that, and have they signaled any kind of resistance to upcoming trade talks in response to how we're handling this
No, we have
virus?
our deal with China. They're going to be buying $250 billion worth of goods and $50 billion from our farmers, and it's a great deal for our country. It's about time somebody did that. And frankly, phase two will start negotiating. I did read one article, but I don't think that article was representative, certainly not of my conversations with President Xi. And they know where it came from. We all know where it came from.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yamiche Alcindor from PBS
Yes.
NewsHour. My first question is, you said that you don't take responsibility, but you did disband the White House Pandemic Office, and the officials that were working in that office left this administration abruptly. So what responsibility do you take to that? And the officials that worked in that office said that the White House lost valuable time because that office wasn't disbanded. What do you make of that?
Well, I just think it's a nasty question, because what we've done is, and Tony has said numerous times that we've saved thousands of lives because of the quick closing. And when you say me, I didn't do it. We have a group of people. I could ask perhaps my administration, but I could perhaps ask Tony about that, because I don't know anything about it. I mean, you say we did that. I don't know anything about it.
You don't know about the reorganization that happened at the National
It's the
Security
administration.
Council.
Perhaps they do that. You know, people let people go. You used to be with a different newspaper than you are now. You know, things like that happen.
But this was
Please go ahead. We're doing a great job. Let me tell you, these professionals behind me and these great, incredible doctors and business people, the best in the world, and I can say that, whether it's retailers or labs or anything you want to say, these are the best in the world. We're doing a great job.
She did ask a credible question that the president obviously is avoiding. And the reason why that I think he's avoiding it is because he's guilty and not recognizing the seriousness of this coronavirus. And he actually thought originally that he could hit it off, cut it off at the bud, cut it off at the chase, and eliminate this same problem that he's now having to deal with today a month ago. I really think that he thought that he could beat it. And now, because he can't beat it, now it's coming back and biting him of the fact that we don't have proper testing. We don't have proper people set up to be able to do the testing. And it's, as if I have said before, and I'll say again, It's a day late and a dollar short in that exchange. But once more, you're talking about spilt milk, and you're talking about something that now has already occurred. Whenever it comes to the finger pointing, I don't think right now would be the time to do the finger pointing. Right now we're in the center of a crisis. We're in the eye of the storm, per se. We're in the heat of the battle. Right now we need to be discussing towards what we need to do, how we need to do it, why we need to do it, where we need to do it, when we need to do it. The when part should have been done 2 weeks ago in regard to what they're doing now. They have learned a valuable lesson on account of this. Or I hope that they have, because you never underestimate Mother Nature. And believe it or not, a disease that forms like this, that mutates, that elevates, that grows, that evolves, is the same thing as a Category 1 storm out in the middle of the ocean that you thought was going to be just a mild, regular, insignificant hurricane, kind of like Katrina. Whenever everybody went to bed the night before Katrina hit, it was projected to have been basically a strong Category 1 or possibly a Category 2 hurricane. By the time we woke up that morning, it had already resonated to a Category 4 or a Category 5 hurricane. It intensified overnight in a unproportionable, unprecedented way. Which once more tells me you never underestimate the power of nature or the power of God. Never. The same way as you never underestimate the power of the devil that can unleash something like this out into society that is out to kill, steal, and destroy. That is the author of confusion. Never underestimate your adversary. If you're a good, true organizer or a potential leader or a commander in any affair, regardless whether it be a physical affair, a biological affair, or a natural catastrophe affair. Never underestimate what can be thrown at you.
We have 40 people right now, 40. Compare that with other countries that have many, many times that amount. And one of the reasons we have 40 and others have, and again, that number's going up, just so you understand. And a number of cases, which are very small, relatively speaking, it's going up. But we've done a great job because we acted quickly, we acted early. And there's nothing we could have done that was better than closing our borders to highly infected areas. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vanessa Yaklish for NTN24 for all Latin American countries,
Yes, sure.
and also for Spain, La Razón, and Antena 3. I would like to ask you two very brief questions. One, for how long we're going to have the emergency, the national emergency?
I hope not long, but it's there now, and it gives tremendous powers for things that we need. Tremendous power, actually. And the Stafford Act and various other things that we're involved with and have studied and memorized in so many different ways and forms. It gives the kind of power that we need to get rid of this virus. And we're going to do it very quickly. And I hope we won't need it very long, but whatever it takes.
So for now, we still don't know for how long. And something very important I wanted to ask you is how do you really think it's essential coordinating with other countries and learning from their lessons that they already suffer the same situation?
Yeah.
Countries, of course, like China and South Korea, but now recently Italy and Spain.
Well,
and
Italy's
how is
having
that coordination done? Thank you so much, Mr.
We're in touch with Italy, and it's a country that we love. We have tremendous millions and millions of people, origins from Italy, and we're working with them. They're in they're in probably, relatively speaking, the toughest position of all. We're in touch with everybody. We're in touch with, when I say everybody, we're in touch with many of the countries that you know about, that you're writing about, and they're calling us asking for advice. They're asking for the advice of the people behind me. Italy's got a tough situation, but they're really they have really clamped down, and I think they're going to see some very good results. It's tough what they did; they really took their medicine, but they're going to see some much better results.
I've said, and I'll say again,